She traveled 2,000 miles for a wedding that never happened. The man who promised her everything took one look and said she wasn't good enough, left her standing in the rain like trash. But what broke her wasn't rejection. It was realizing she'd been foolish enough to believe him. This is the story of Ilara Wynn, the woman who came west for love and found something she never expected. If you want to know how a single choice can change everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Bob Bombay. The rain came down like punishment. It hammered the wooden platform of Millridge Station, turning the dust to mud and the air to mist. Ilara Wynn stood beneath the narrow overhang, her suitcase pressed against her legs, her traveling coat already soaked through at the shoulders. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, watching the other passengers disappear into wagons and embraces, into lives that were waiting for them. Hers was supposed to be waiting too. She scanned the thinning crowd again, searching for the face she'd memorized from a single photograph. Calvin Rourke. Dark hair, sharp jaw, confident eyes. The kind of man who looked like he knew what he wanted and how to get it. He'd written to her for 6 months, letters that arrived in Philadelphia like clockwork, each one more persuasive than the last. He'd told her about Montana, about opportunity, about a life they could build together. He'd sent a train ticket, he'd promised, and she'd believed him. "Miss? You waiting on someone?" Ilara turned. A station attendant stood nearby, an older man with kind eyes and a practical frown. "Yes," she said, hearing the tightness in her own voice. "Calvin Rourke. Do you know him?" The man's expression shifted, something uncomfortable crossing his features. "I know him. He was supposed to meet me here." The attendant glanced toward the street beyond the platform, then back at her. "Well, he's here. That's his carriage." Ilara followed his gaze. A polished black carriage sat at the edge of the platform, the horses stamping impatiently in the rain. And there, stepping down from it, with the casual grace of someone who'd never been inconvenienced in his life, was Calvin Rourke. Her breath caught. He looked exactly like his photograph. Better, even. Tall and well-dressed, his coat tailored perfectly, his boots shined despite the mud. He moved through the rain like it didn't touch him, and for a moment, just a moment, Ilara felt the flutter of hope she'd carried across 2,000 miles. Then he saw her. His step faltered. His eyes swept over her, quick and assessing, and something cold settled into his expression. He didn't smile, didn't hurry forward. He just stopped, 10 feet away, and looked at her like she was something he'd ordered that had arrived broken. "Calvin?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He tilted his head slightly, his mouth curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're Ilara Wynn." It wasn't a question, it was an observation, a disappointing one. "Yes?" She stepped forward, clutching her suitcase. "I got your letters. You said—" "I know what I said." He cut her off, his tone polite but final. Then he laughed. It was a short, incredulous sound, the kind you make when something doesn't go according to plan. "I'm sorry, this is awkward." The flutter of hope died. Ilara stood frozen, rainwater dripping from the brim of her hat, while Calvin Rourke looked at her like she was a mistake he needed to correct quickly. "I don't understand," she said. "Look," he said, and now his voice carried the patronizing patience of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "The letters they were nice. You write well, but I thought you'd be different." "Different?" "More refined, more—" He gestured vaguely at her, his gloved hand describing circles in the air. "You're not what I expected." The station attendant had disappeared. The platform was nearly empty now, just a few stragglers loading trunks onto wagons. But the ones who remained had gone quiet, their attention drawn to the scene unfolding in front of Calvin Rourke's expensive carriage. Ilara felt their eyes on her, felt the heat rising in her cheeks despite the cold rain. "I came all this way," she said, and hated how her voice shook. "You sent me a ticket. You told me—" "I know what I told you." Calvin's patience was fraying now, his expression hardening. "And I'm sure you're a perfectly nice woman, but I have a reputation in this town. I have expectations, and I can't—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I can't be seen with someone who doesn't fit." The words landed like stones. someone who doesn't fit. Alara stared at him, this man she'd spent 6 months dreaming about. This man who'd written about building a future together, about partnership and trust, and all the things she'd been foolish enough to believe in. And she saw him clearly now, saw what he really was. A coward dressed in expensive clothes. "So that's it?" she said quietly. "You're just going to leave me here?" Calvin shifted his weight, uncomfortable now. A few of the onlookers were whispering. He didn't like that. Didn't like the attention this was drawing. "I'll pay for a hotel tonight," he said, reaching into his coat. "And a ticket back east. That's more than fair." He held out a fold of bills. Alara didn't take it. "Keep it," she said. Calvin's jaw tightened. "Don't be stupid. You have no money, no family here. What are you going to do?" "I don't know." The words came out steady this time, harder. "But I'm not taking anything else from you." For a moment, something flickered in Calvin's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. Then it was gone, replaced by indifference. He shoved the money back into his pocket. "Suit yourself." He turned toward his carriage, then paused, glancing back. "Word of advice? Go home. This territory isn't kind to women like you." He climbed into the carriage without waiting for a response. The driver snapped the reins and the wheels churned through the mud, splashing dirty water across the platform as they pulled away. Alara stood there, suitcase in hand, and watched him disappear into the rain. The whispers grew louder. She turned and found a small crowd of strangers staring at her, curiosity, pity, judgment, all mixed together in their faces. A woman in a blue bonnet shook her head slowly. A man near the ticket window muttered something to his companion, and they both laughed. Alara's hands tightened on the suitcase handle. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, to demand answers, to make someone, anyone, acknowledge that this was wrong, that she deserved better than this. But her throat was too tight, and the rain was too loud, and all she could do was stand there and feel the weight of every mistake she'd made pressing down on her shoulders. "Miss Wynne?" She turned. A young woman approached, maybe a few years younger than Alara, wearing a plain dress and a worried expression. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry." Alara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" "No." The young woman bit her lip. "The boarding house is full. There was a cattle auction this week, and every room in town is taken." She hesitated. "You could try the church, but Reverend Michaels doesn't usually let women stay overnight without—" "I'll figure it out," Alara said. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "Thank you." The young woman nodded and hurried away, leaving Alara alone again. The platform was emptying fast now. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone except her. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the edge of the overhang, staring out at the rain-soaked street. The town of Millridge spread out before her, small, practical, unwelcoming. False-fronted buildings lined the muddy main road. A general store, a saloon, a bank with Calvin Rourke's name painted on the window in gold letters. Of course he owned the bank. Alara closed her eyes and tried to think. She had $17 in her purse, no return ticket, no family to wire for help. Her parents had died 3 years ago, and her only sister had married and moved to Oregon. She had skills. She could cook, sew, keep books, but who was going to hire a woman who'd just been publicly humiliated by the town's most prominent citizen? The rain drummed harder. She was going to have to sleep outside. The thought hit her with dull certainty. There was nowhere else. Maybe she could find a barn, something with a roof, somewhere she wouldn't freeze. "You planning to stand there all night?" The voice was low, rough-edged, and unfamiliar. Alara opened her eyes and found a man standing a few feet away, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in work clothes that had seen better days. His face was weathered, lined in the way that came from years outdoors, and his eyes were the color of slate, steady, unreadable. "I'm fine," Alara said automatically. "You don't look fine," she bristled. "I know what you need." He cut her off, not unkindly. "You need a place to stay, and you're not going to find one in town." Alara stared at him. "Who are you?" "Rowan Hale." The name meant nothing to her. "I have a ranch about 8 miles west," he continued. "It's not much, but there's a spare room. You're welcome to it." Every instinct she had screamed at her to say no. She didn't know this man, didn't know anything about him except that he dressed like a laborer and stood in the rain offering shelter to strangers. But what choice did she have? "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" Rowan shrugged. Because you need help. It wasn't an answer, or maybe it was the only answer that mattered. Alara looked past him, toward the empty street, the darkening sky. She thought about Calvin's carriage disappearing into the rain. Thought about sleeping in a barn. Thought about going back east with nothing to show for the last 6 months, except humiliation. One night, she said. Rowan nodded. One night, he picked up her suitcase before she could protest and started toward a wagon parked at the far end of the platform. Alara followed, her boots squelching in the mud, her heart pounding with uncertainty. The wagon was old and plain, the kind used for hauling supplies. Rowan set her suitcase in the back and offered her a hand up. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was calloused, strong, and steadier than anything she'd felt in hours. She climbed onto the bench, and Rowan settled beside her, taking up the reins. The horses started forward without needing to be told, their hooves splashing through puddles as they turned onto the main road. Nobody watched them leave. The town fell away behind them, swallowed by rain and darkness. Alara sat in silence, her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying not to think about what she was doing, trying not to feel the fear crawling up her spine. "You came for Calvin Rourke," Rowan said after a while. It wasn't a question. "Yes. He's a bastard." Alara glanced at him, startled by the bluntness. Rowan kept his eyes on the road. "Just so you know," she almost laughed. "Almost. I figured that out." "Good." They lapsed back into silence. The rain began to ease, turning from a downpour to a steady drizzle. The road stretched out ahead of them, winding through open grassland that seemed to go on forever. Alara had never seen land like this. So much sky, so much space. It made her feel small, insignificant. "How far is your ranch?" she asked. "About an hour." An hour. Alone with a stranger. Every cautionary tale her mother had ever told her whispered in the back of her mind. But Rowan didn't look at her, didn't try to make conversation. He just drove, his attention fixed on the road, his posture relaxed in a way that suggested this was routine for him. Hauling lost women out of town in the rain. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to be nervous. The silence stretched. Alara studied him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't handsome, not in the way Calvin was. His face was too rough, too lived in. But there was something solid about him, something that didn't shift or change depending on who was watching. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yeah." "No wife?" "No." "Family?" "Not anymore." The answers came short and clipped, not rude but not inviting further questions either. Alara took the hint and fell quiet again. The road climbed a low hill, and at the top Rowan pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said, nodding toward the valley below. Alara followed his gaze and saw it, a small ranch house sitting alone in the grassland, dark and square against the fading light. A barn stood nearby, and a few outbuildings scattered around it. Fences marked off pastures where shapes moved in the dimness. Cattle, she guessed, or horses. It looked lonely. "That's home," Rowan said. He snapped the reins, and the wagon rolled forward again, descending into the valley. As they drew closer, Alara could make out more details. The house was simple, built from rough-cut timber with a narrow porch and a single chimney. No curtains in the windows. No flowers. No decoration. Just a structure designed to keep the weather out. Rowan pulled the wagon up to the porch and climbed down, grabbing her suitcase from the back. Alara followed more slowly, her legs stiff from the ride. "Watch the steps," Rowan said. "Third one's loose." She tested each board carefully as she climbed, then stopped on the porch while Rowan unlocked the door. It swung open with a creak, revealing a dark interior. He stepped inside and struck a match, lighting a lamp on a table near the door. Warm light spread through the room, and Alara got her first look at Rowan Hale's home. It was sparse. A main room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table, 2 chairs. Shelves lined one wall, holding a few books, some tools, a tin of tobacco. No pictures. No personal touches. It looked like a place someone slept, not a place someone lived. "Kitchen's through there," Rowan said, pointing to a doorway on the left. "Spare room's upstairs. There's a bed, a dresser, should have clean sheets." "Thank you," Alara said quietly. Rowan set her suitcase down near the stairs. "You hungry?" She realized she was. She hadn't eaten since that morning, and even then it had only been a biscuit she'd bought from a vendor at the last station. Yes, I'll make something. He moved toward the kitchen without waiting for a response. Ilara stood awkwardly in the main room, unsure what to do with herself. She heard the clatter of pots, the scrape of a drawer opening. After a moment, she followed him. The kitchen was as plain as the rest of the house. A wood stove, a sink with a pump, a small table pushed against the wall. Rowan was pulling supplies from a cupboard, bread, butter, some kind of dried meat. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table. She sat. He worked in silence, slicing bread, frying the meat in a pan. The smell filled the small room, and Ilara's stomach twisted with hunger. When he set a plate in front of her, she had to resist the urge to grab it immediately. "Eat," Rowan said. She did. The food was simple, nothing fancy, nothing like the meals she used to cook back in Philadelphia, but it was warm and filling, and right now that was all that mattered. Rowan sat across from her with his own plate, eating methodically, his gaze fixed somewhere past her shoulder. "How long have you lived here?" Ilara asked between bites. 10 years. Alone the whole time? Mostly. She waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Do you run cattle? Some? Horses, too. Is it hard? Doing it by yourself? Rowan looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Not annoyance, but maybe confusion, like he couldn't figure out why she was asking. "It's work," he said finally. Ilara nodded and went back to her food. They finished in silence. Rowan collected the plates and washed them in the sink while Ilara sat at the table, exhaustion settling into her bones. The warmth of the kitchen, the food, the sheer relief of being inside, it all hit her at once, and she had to fight to keep her eyes open. "You should sleep," Rowan said, drying his hands on a rag. "I'm fine." "You're about to fall over." He was right. Ilara pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Rowan led her back through the main room and up the narrow staircase. The spare room was at the end of a short hallway, small, with a single window and a bed pushed against the wall. The sheets were faded but clean, and there was a quilt folded at the foot of the bed. "Bathroom's downstairs," Rowan said. "Out back. There's a lantern by the door." "Thank you." Ilara's voice was barely above a whisper. Rowan nodded and turned to leave. "Rowan?" He stopped, glancing back. "Why did you do this? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Because nobody else would," he said finally. Then he was gone, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Ilara closed the door and leaned against it, her chest tight. She looked around the room, at the plain walls, the simple bed, the window showing nothing but darkness and rain. This wasn't what she'd imagined. None of it was. She'd come west for a wedding, for a future, for a man who'd promised her everything and delivered nothing, and now she was here, in a stranger's house, in the middle of nowhere, with no plan and no way forward. She should have been terrified, but as she sank down onto the bed and pulled the quilt around her shoulders, all she felt was tired. Outside, the rain drummed against the roof, steady and relentless. And somewhere downstairs, she heard the faint creak of floorboards as Rowan Hale moved through his empty house. Ilara closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what came next. Tonight, she just needed to survive. The morning came too soon. Ilara woke to pale light filtering through the window and the sound of something clattering downstairs. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The train, the platform, Calvin's cold dismissal, Rowan's unexpected offer. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from the unfamiliar bed. The room looked different in daylight, still sparse, but less forbidding. Dust motes drifted through the sunlight, and she could see the valley spread out beyond the window, endless grass rippling in the wind. Another clatter from downstairs. Ilara stood, smoothing her wrinkled dress. She'd slept in her clothes, too exhausted to bother changing. Now she felt grimy, disheveled, exactly like what she was, a woman with nowhere to go. She made her way downstairs carefully, mindful of the creaky steps. Rowan was in the kitchen, working at the stove. He glanced up when she appeared, his expression neutral. "Coffee's ready?" he said. "Thank you." She poured herself a cup from the pot on the stove and sat at the small table. The coffee was strong, bitter, nothing like the carefully brewed tea she'd grown up with. She drank it anyway. Rowan set a plate in front of her, eggs, bread, some kind of fried potato. She hadn't expected breakfast. You didn't have to. You're here. You need to eat. He sat across from her with his own plate. After this, I'll take you back to town. The words hit her like cold water. Of course. One night. That's what they'd agreed on. Alara stared down at her food, her appetite suddenly gone. Right. They ate in silence. Rowan finished quickly, draining his coffee and standing to wash his plate. Alara picked at her eggs, her mind racing. Back to town. Back to Calvin's territory. Back to stares and whispers and absolutely no options. What if I stayed? The words came out before she could stop them. Rowan turned, his hands still wet from the sink. What? Just for a few days, until I figure out what to do. There's nothing to figure out. You go back east. I can't. Why not? Because I don't have the money for a ticket. That was only part of it. She did have enough for a ticket if she was careful, but it was true enough. And it was easier than explaining the rest. That going back felt like admitting defeat. That everyone in Philadelphia had told her this was a mistake, and proving them right would break something in her she didn't think she could fix. Rowan dried his hands slowly, his expression unreadable. You can't stay here. Why not? Because it's not... He stopped, searching for words. It's not proper. Alara almost laughed. Proper? I slept in a stranger's house last night. I think we're past proper. That was different. How? It was one night. And a few more nights would ruin your reputation? She stood, frustration boiling over. I'm not asking for charity. I can work, I can cook, clean, help with whatever needs doing. You said yourself you run this place alone. An extra pair of hands has to be worth something. Rowan stared at her, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in his face. I can pay, she added quickly. Not much, but I have some money. I can contribute. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. Rowan looked away, his jaw tight. This is a bad idea. Maybe, but it's the only idea I have. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, a horse whinnied. The wind rattled the windows. A week, Rowan said finally. After that, you figure something else out. Relief crashed over her. A week. Yes. Thank you. Rowan nodded once, then grabbed his hat from a peg by the door. I've got work to do. You can do whatever. Don't burn the house down. He left before she could respond, the door closing firmly behind him. Alara stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding. A week. She had a week. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. She started with the kitchen. It wasn't charity or gratitude that drove her. It was the simple fact that sitting still made her think too much. About Calvin, about the platform, about the looks on those strangers' faces when he'd dismissed her like week-old bread nobody wanted. So she cleaned. The dishes from breakfast were still in the sink. Alara washed them, then kept going. She scrubbed the counter, swept the floor, organized the cupboards that held mismatched plates and cups with chips in the rims. Everything was functional but neglected, like Rowan had never considered that a kitchen could be more than just a place to cook food. By midday, the room looked different. Not fancy, but orderly, clean. She moved to the main room next, dusting shelves, sweeping out the fireplace, beating the rug outside until her arms ached. The physical work felt good, gave her something to focus on besides the growing realization that she had no plan beyond surviving the next 7 days. When Rowan came in for lunch, he stopped in the doorway and stared. What did you do? Alara looked up from where she was wiping down the table. I cleaned. You said I could do whatever. I meant read a book or something. I don't like sitting still. He grunted and moved past her to the kitchen. She heard him rummaging around, then he came back with bread and cheese on a plate. He sat at the table and ate without comment, his eyes occasionally drifting around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. Alara poured herself water from the pitcher and sat across from him. The third fence post in the north pasture is rotting, he said suddenly. She blinked. Okay, and the barn door sticks, needs the hinges oiled. I can do that. He looked at her skeptically. You know how to oil hinges? I can figure it out. Rowan finished his bread, chewing slowly. You ever lived on a ranch before? No. Ever lived outside a city? No. Can you ride a horse? No. Milk a cow? No. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. So what exactly can you do? The question stung, probably because she'd been asking herself the same thing since yesterday. What could she do? She could read and write. She could sew a straight seam and balance a ledger. She could cook a decent meal and keep a house in order. But out here, in this vast empty space where survival seemed to depend on knowing how to fix fences and handle livestock, those skills felt useless. I can learn, she said quietly. Rowan's expression softened slightly. Not much, but enough that she noticed. The oil's in the barn, he said. Third shelf, red can. Don't use too much. He stood and headed back outside, leaving his plate on the table. Alara washed it, then went to find the barn. The structure was bigger than it looked from the house, with high rafters and stalls lining both sides. 2 horses watched her from their stalls, curious but calm. The smell hit her immediately. Hay, leather, animal warmth. It wasn't unpleasant, just unfamiliar. She found the oil on the 3rd shelf, exactly where Rowan said it would be. The can was heavy, and when she tried to open it, the lid wouldn't budge. She twisted harder, her hand slipping on the metal. Nothing. You're doing it wrong. She spun around. A young man stood in the barn doorway, maybe 19 or 20, with sun-bleached hair and an easy grin. He was dressed like Rowan, work clothes, boots caked in dried mud, but his face held none of Rowan's guardedness. Who are you? Alara asked. Danny, I work here sometimes. Help out when Rowan needs an extra hand. He walked over and took the can from her, popping the lid off with a quick twist. There. Just needed some muscle. Thank you. You're the woman from town. It wasn't a question. The one Calvin Rourke? Yes. She cut him off, her voice sharp. That's me. Danny had the grace to look embarrassed. Sorry, didn't mean to bring it up. Everyone's already talking about it anyway, aren't they? Small town. People talk. He handed the can back to her. For what it's worth, Calvin's an ass. You're better off. Alara managed a tight smile. So I've been told. Danny glanced toward the barn door. Rowan know you're out here? He sent me to oil the barn door. He's got you working already? Danny laughed. That sounds like him. Well, if you need help, holler. I'll be around. He left, whistling a tune she didn't recognize. Alara found the barn door and got to work. It took her 3 tries to figure out where the oil needed to go, and even then she wasn't sure she did it right. But when she tested the door, it swung easier than before, so she counted it as a win. Small victories. That's what she needed right now. When she returned to the house, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the valley in shades of orange and gold. She found vegetables in the cupboard, potatoes, carrots, an onion that had seen better days, and set about making soup. Rowan came in as it was finishing, his boots heavy on the porch. He washed his hands at the kitchen pump and sat at the table without speaking. Alara ladled soup into 2 bowls and set one in front of him. He stared at it. You didn't have to cook. I was hungry. It seemed easier to make enough for both of us. He picked up his spoon and tasted it, his expression unreadable. Then he took another spoonful, and another. It's good, he said finally. It's just soup. Most people can't make decent soup. They ate in silence for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Danny came by, Alara said. Rowan nodded. He tell you his life story? Kid talks too much. He seems nice. He's young. Young people are always nice. Rowan finished his soup and stood to wash his bowl. He works for me twice a week, helps with the heavy lifting. Is he from town? His family has a farm about 5 miles south. Good people. Alara hesitated, then asked, What about you? Do you have family? Rowan's shoulders tensed slightly. Not anymore. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He didn't elaborate, and Alara didn't push. She was learning that Rowan didn't offer information freely. If you wanted to know something, you had to earn it through silence and patience. That night, she lay in the narrow bed upstairs and listened to the house settle around her. It creaked differently than buildings in Philadelphia, looser somehow, like it was still deciding whether to stand or fall. She thought about the week ahead. 6 more days. What happened after that, she still didn't know. Going back east felt wrong, but staying here felt impossible. Rowan had made it clear this was temporary. A kindness extended, not a life offered. But maybe in 6 days she could figure something out. Find work in another town, save enough money to start over somewhere new. Maybe. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, she dreamed of rain and train platforms and a man laughing at her while strangers watched. The next morning, she woke to find Rowan already gone. A note on the kitchen table said he'd be working the north pasture and wouldn't be back until evening. There was bread in the cupboard and eggs in a basket by the stove. Elara made herself breakfast, then looked around the empty house. Yesterday she'd cleaned. Today she needed a different project. She found it in the state of Rowan's wardrobe. His clothes were functional but worn, with buttons missing and hems coming undone. The kind of neglect that came from living alone and not caring about appearances. She gathered everything that needed mending and spread it across the table in the main room. Her sewing kit was still in her suitcase upstairs. She retrieved it, one of the few things she'd brought from Philadelphia that still felt useful, and got to work. The rhythm of it was soothing. Thread through needle, stitch after stitch, each small repair a problem she could actually solve. By the time the sun was high, she'd fixed 2 shirts and a pair of trousers. Danny showed up around noon carrying a crate of supplies. "Rowan asked me to drop these off," he said, setting the crate on the porch. Then he noticed what she was doing. "You sew?" "When I need to. My ma could use help. She takes in mending from folks in town, but she can barely keep up these days, arthritis in her hands." Elara looked up. "She pays?" "Not much, but something." Danny shrugged. "You interested? I could ask her." "Yes, please." It wasn't a solution to anything long-term, but it was something, a way to earn money, a reason to stay useful. Danny grinned. "I'll talk to her tonight." After he left, Elara finished the mending and started on dinner. She found dried beans, salt pork, and some herbs that looked like they'd been sitting in the cupboard for years. She made a stew, letting it simmer while she swept the porch and checked the barn door again. When Rowan returned that evening, dirty and exhausted, he stopped on the threshold and stared at the neat stack of mended clothes on the table. "You've been busy. I told you I could work." He picked up one of the shirts, examining the stitching. "This is good work." "Danny said his mother takes in mending. He thinks she might hire me." Rowan set the shirt down carefully. "You planning to stay longer than a week?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't planned anything, hadn't dared to. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I just thought if I could make some money, it would give me options." Rowan nodded slowly. "Options are good." They ate dinner in the kitchen, the stew thick and filling. Rowan asked about her day, and she told him about the mending, about Danny's visit. He listened without comment, occasionally nodding, his attention fully on his food. "Tomorrow I need to ride out to check the water line," he said when they finished. "You ever ridden a horse?" "No." "Want to learn?" Elara hesitated. "Yes?" "Meet me at the barn after breakfast." The next morning, she found him waiting with 2 horses already saddled. One was a large bay gelding, the other a smaller chestnut mare. "This is Copper," Rowan said, nodding to the mare. "She's calm, good for beginners." Elara approached slowly, extending her hand. The horse sniffed her palm, then huffed softly. "Now what?" Elara asked. "Now you get on." He showed her how to mount, where to put her feet, how to hold the reins. It took 3 tries before she managed to swing herself into the saddle without losing her balance. "Relax," Rowan said. "You're too stiff." "I'm trying not to fall off." "You won't fall off. Copper's not going to throw you." He mounted his own horse with practiced ease and started toward the pasture. Copper followed without being told, her gait smooth and steady. Elara gripped the reins tightly, her heart pounding. But after a few minutes, she started to relax, started to feel the rhythm of the horse's movement, the way her body could adjust and balance. "You're doing fine," Rowan called back. They rode for an hour, checking fence lines and a small creek that fed into a larger stream. Rowan pointed out landmarks, explained how the water system worked, how the land drained after storms. Elara tried to absorb it all, though most of it felt overwhelming. On the ride back, her legs ached and her back was sore, but she felt something else too. Accomplishment. She'd learned something new, survived something unfamiliar. "Tomorrow we'll go farther," Rowan said when they reached the barn. "If you're up for it." "I'm up for it." He almost smiled. "We'll see how you feel after your legs stop hurting." He was right. By evening, her muscles screamed. She could barely walk up the stairs to her room. But the next morning, she met him at the barn again. The days began to blur together. Each morning, Rowan taught her something new. How to feed the horses, how to check their hooves for stones, how to muck out stalls without gagging at the smell. The work was hard and unglamorous, but Alara threw herself into it with determination. Danny brought word from his mother on the 4th day. She'd be happy to have Alara's help with mending. Pay wasn't much, a few cents per item, but it was steady work. She wants to meet you first, Danny said. Make sure you know what you're doing. When? Tomorrow, if you're free. I can drive you to town. Alara glanced at Rowan, who was fixing a broken saddle strap nearby. Go, he said without looking up. I can manage one day without you. The ride to town the next morning made her stomach tight with anxiety. She hadn't been back since that first night. Hadn't seen Calvin or any of the people who'd watched him humiliate her. Danny seemed to sense her discomfort. Don't worry, we're going straight to my ma's place. Nowhere near the main street. His mother's farm was on the outskirts of town, a modest house surrounded by fields. The woman who answered the door was small and weathered, with kind eyes and hands that were gnarled with arthritis. You must be Alara, she said. I'm Margaret. Come in. The house smelled like bread and lavender. Margaret led her to a back room where baskets of mending were stacked against the walls. I'm behind, Margaret said apologetically. Used to be able to keep up, but these hands don't work like they used to. She showed Alara the work, torn seams, missing buttons, worn hems, simple repairs, but there were dozens of them. Can you handle this? Margaret asked. Alara picked up a shirt with a torn sleeve. Yes. Then it's yours. Take as much as you can carry. Bring it back when it's done. They agreed on payment, 3 cents per simple repair, 5 for anything complicated. It wasn't much, but if Alara worked fast, she could make a few dollars a week. Danny helped her load 2 baskets into the wagon. You did good, he said on the ride back. Ma likes you. She doesn't like everybody. How could she tell? We barely spoke. She's got a sense about people, Danny grinned. Plus, she said you didn't treat her like she was helpless. Lots of folks do that when they see her hands. When they reached the ranch, Rowan was working in the barn. He glanced at the baskets as Danny carried them inside. You got the job. I got the job. He nodded. Good. That evening, while Rowan worked on repairing a broken gate, Alara sat at the kitchen table and started on the mending. The work was meditative, each stitch bringing her closer to something she could measure. Money, independence, control over her own future. Rowan came in as darkness fell, smelling like sawdust and sweat. He washed up at the pump, then sat across from her. You've been at that for 3 hours. I want to finish this batch by tomorrow. It's late. I'm not tired. He watched her work for a moment. You always this stubborn? When I need to be. A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. Week's almost up. Alara's hands stilled. She'd been trying not to think about that. I know, she said quietly. You planning to leave? She looked up and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Do you want me to? Rowan was quiet for a long time. The lamplight flickered across his face, casting shadows that made him look older, more tired. No, he said finally. The word hung between them. I can pay rent, Alara said quickly. Once I start earning from the mending. And I'll keep helping with the ranch work. I won't be a burden. You're not a burden. Then what am I? He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're someone who needed help, that's all. He left the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Alara sat alone with her mending, her hands shaking slightly. That's all. But she didn't believe him. And from the way he'd looked at her, she didn't think he believed it either. The next morning, neither of them mentioned the conversation. They fell back into their routine, breakfast, morning chores, Rowan heading out to work the land while Alara tackled mending and household tasks. But something had shifted. Rowan started explaining things more when they worked together, pointed out the names of different grasses, showed her how to read the weather and the way clouds gathered over the mountains. Small things, but they felt significant. Danny noticed it too. You two getting along better, he said one afternoon while helping Alara carry water to the barn. We're managing. That's big for Rowan. He doesn't let people in easy. What happened to him? He mentioned family once, but Danny's expression grew somber. His wife and kid died. 6, maybe 7 years ago. Fever swept through one winter, took half the town. Alara's chest tightened. He had a child? Little girl, 4 years old. Sarah, I think her name was. Danny set down the water bucket. After that, he just closed off. Stopped going to town except when he had to. Stopped talking to people. This place became his whole world. And nobody tried to help him? Some did. But Rowan's the type who pushes people away when he's hurting. Eventually, folks stopped trying. That night, Alara watched Rowan across the dinner table with new understanding. The sparse house made sense now, the lack of decoration, the empty spaces. He'd stripped away anything that might remind him of what he'd lost. And somehow, he'd let her in anyway. "I'm staying," she said suddenly. Rowan looked up from his food. "What?" "I'm staying, if that's all right with you. I can pay my way, and I won't interfere with your life, but I'd like to stay." He studied her face for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I have nowhere else to go. And because—" She hesitated. "Because you gave me shelter when nobody else would. That means something." Rowan set down his fork. "This isn't charity, Alara. If you stay, you work. Same as anyone. I understand. And if it doesn't work out, if you decide you want to leave, then I'll leave. But I want to try." He nodded slowly. "All right then." They finished dinner in silence, but it felt different now. Less like two strangers occupying the same space, and more like two people who'd agreed to build something together, even if neither of them knew exactly what that something was. The second week passed more easily than the first. Alara found her rhythm. Mornings spent working with Rowan, afternoons dedicated to mending, evenings cooking dinner and maintaining the house. It was exhausting but satisfying in a way her life in Philadelphia had never been. She returned her first batch of mending to Margaret and came back with more. The money wasn't much, but it was hers, earned by her own hands. "You're fast," Margaret said approvingly, "and your stitching is clean. I've got folks asking specifically for your work now." "Really? Don't sound so surprised. Good work speaks for itself." On her way back from town, Danny drove past the bank. Alara tried not to look, but she couldn't help it. Through the window, she saw Calvin at his desk, talking to a well-dressed older man. He looked exactly the same. Polished, confident, untouched by anything resembling consequence. "He's been telling people you left town," Danny said quietly. "What?" "Says you realized Montana wasn't for you and went back east. Saves him embarrassment, I guess." Alara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Of course he does." "Does it bother you?" "No." And she realized it was true. Calvin felt like something from another lifetime, a mistake she'd made and moved past. Let him say whatever he wants. When they reached the ranch, Rowan was working on a new fence post. He looked up as she climbed down from the wagon. "How'd it go?" "Good. Margaret's happy with the work." He nodded and went back to digging, his movements steady and efficient. Alara carried the new mending inside and set it on the table. Through the window, she could see Rowan working, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat dampening his back. He'd been like that when she first arrived, distant, closed off, barely speaking. But over the past 2 weeks, she'd seen glimpses of something else, dry humor in his comments about Danny's chatter. Patience when teaching her to handle the horses. A quietness that felt less like withdrawal and more like peace. She was starting to understand him, starting to see the shape of the life he'd built from grief and solitude. And despite everything, despite the uncertainty of her future, despite having no idea what came next, she felt safer here than she had in years. That realization should have scared her. Instead, it felt like coming home. 3 weeks became 4. 4 became 5. The ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, if normal meant waking before dawn to feed horses and falling into bed too exhausted to dream. Alara's hands grew rough from work. Her skin darkened from the sun. She stopped flinching when the horses nudged her shoulder and learned to read the sky well enough to know when rain was coming. The mending money accumulated slowly in a jar she kept in her room. Not much, but tangible proof that she was building something, even if she didn't know what. On a Friday afternoon in early September, she was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard horses approaching. 2 of them, moving at an easy trot. She shaded her eyes against the sun and saw Danny riding up with someone else, a woman around Alara's age, dark-haired and pretty, sitting side saddle with practiced grace. "Alara?" Danny called out, waving. "This is my sister, Rose." Rose dismounted smoothly and extended a hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. "I've been wanting to meet you. Ma talks about you constantly." "Good things, I hope." "The best. She says you're the answer to her prayers." Rose glanced around the property, taking in the neat garden Alara had started, the freshly painted porch rail. "You've done wonders with this place. Rowan's lucky to have you." "I work for him," Alara said quickly. "It's not—" "I know what it is." Rose's smile didn't fade. "I didn't mean anything by it, just that this place needed some life, and you brought it." Danny had already wandered toward the barn, calling for Rowan. Rose lowered her voice. "Ignore the gossip in town, all right? People talk because they're bored, not because they know anything." "What gossip?" Rose looked uncomfortable. "Just, a woman living out here with a man who isn't her husband. Some folks have opinions about it." Alara's stomach twisted. She'd known this would happen eventually. A town like Millridge had nothing better to do than judge. "Let them talk," she said, trying to sound unbothered. "That's the spirit." Rose touched her arm lightly. "You should come to the dance next Saturday. In town. Everyone goes. It'd be good for you to show your face, let people see you're not hiding." "I don't think—" "Bring Rowan. He hasn't been to a town function in years. It'd do him good, too." Before Alara could protest further, Rowan emerged from the barn with Danny. His expression tightened slightly when he saw Rose. "Mrs. Patterson," he said formally. "Still calling me that?" Rose laughed. "Rowan, I've been widowed for 2 years. You can use my first name." "Rose," he amended, though he didn't look comfortable with it. "I was just telling Alara about the dance next Saturday. You two should come." "No." The word came out flat and final. Rose didn't back down. "Why not? When's the last time you did something besides work yourself half to death?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're a hermit." She softened her tone. "It's one night, Rowan. A few hours. You might even enjoy yourself." "I don't dance." "Then don't dance. Just show up. Have a drink. Remind people you're still human." Rowan's jaw clenched. He glanced at Alara, then away. "We'll see." Rose smiled like she'd won. "That's the closest to yes I've gotten from you in years. I'll take it." After Rose and Danny left, Rowan was quieter than usual. He worked through dinner preparation without speaking, his movements sharp and precise. "You don't have to go," Alara said finally. "To the dance. I can go alone if you want." "You want to go?" She hadn't thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe it would be good to see people. Show them I'm not ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" "Of being here. Of living with you." She met his eyes. "People are talking, Rowan." Rose said, "I don't care what people say." "Well, I do." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I care that they think I'm some fallen woman living in sin. I care that they probably assume the worst about both of us." Rowan set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. "Then we go. We show them there's nothing to talk about." "You don't have to do that." "Yeah, I do." He picked up the knife again. "Because if I let you go alone, they'll talk more. At least if I'm there, they'll have to look me in the eye while they whisper." The dance was held in the town hall, a large wooden building that doubled as a meeting space and occasional courtroom. When Alara and Rowan arrived on Saturday evening, the place was already packed with people. Alara had borrowed a dress from Rose, dark blue with lace at the collar, the nicest thing she'd worn since arriving in Montana. She felt exposed, walking into that crowded room with all those eyes turning toward her. Rowan stayed close, his hand resting lightly on her back. He'd cleaned up for the occasion, wearing a pressed shirt and jacket that made him look almost unfamiliar, almost civilized. "There's the refreshment table," he said, steering her toward the back. "Get yourself something to drink. I'll be right back." He disappeared into the crowd before she could ask where he was going. Alara poured herself punch from a large bowl and tried not to notice the stares, the whispers. A group of women near the window were watching her with barely concealed curiosity. "Miss Wynne," She turned to find a tall man with silver hair and a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. He extended a hand. "Sheriff Coleman, we haven't been formally introduced." His handshake was brief but polite. "I've heard about you. Margaret speaks highly of your work." "That's kind of her." "I also heard about your arrival in town. Rough welcome." Elara stiffened. "That's one way to put it." "Calvin Rourke's an idiot," Coleman said bluntly. "Always has been. You're better off." She blinked, surprised by his directness. "I mean it," he continued. "Man treats people like they're investments. Soon as they don't pay off, he cuts his losses. You dodged a bullet." Before she could respond, Rowan reappeared, 2 drinks in hand. He gave one to the sheriff with a nod. "Coleman?" "Hale? Been a while?" "Yeah." The 2 men stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Coleman cleared his throat. "Good to see you back in town, both of you." He tipped his hat to Elara and walked away. "You know him well?" she asked. "Well enough. He's decent. Doesn't ask questions he doesn't need answers to." The music started, a fiddle and guitar playing something lively. Couples moved onto the floor, and the room filled with motion and noise. Rowan leaned against the wall, nursing his drink. "You want to dance?" "I thought you didn't dance." "I don't. But if you want to, Danny's over there looking for a partner." Elara followed his gaze and saw Danny waving enthusiastically from across the room. She laughed despite herself. "I think I'll stay here." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the festivities. Rose appeared at one point, dragging Danny onto the floor despite his protests. Margaret was there too, chatting with a group of older women near the door. For a while it was almost pleasant, almost normal. Then Calvin walked in. Elara saw him before Rowan did. He entered with the same confidence he'd had on the train platform, flanked by 2 well-dressed men she didn't recognize. His eyes swept the room, pausing when they landed on her. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or displeasure. He said something to his companions and started across the room, moving with deliberate purpose. "He's coming over here," Elara said quietly. Rowan straightened, his posture shifting. "Let him come." Calvin stopped a few feet away, his smile polite but cold. "Elara, Rowan, didn't expect to see either of you here." "Why wouldn't we be here?" Rowan's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. "No reason, just surprising." Calvin's attention focused on Elara. "I heard you were still in the area, working for Margaret, is it?" "Among other things. And living," he glanced at Rowan, "out at the Hale Ranch?" "That's right." Calvin's smile sharpened. "How enterprising." "What do you want, Calvin?" Rowan's patience was clearly thinning. "Just making conversation. It's a social event, after all." Calvin turned back to Elara. "I've been thinking about you, actually. About our misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Elara's voice came out flat. "Is that what you call it?" "I was hasty. I'll admit that. I made a judgment based on first impressions, and that wasn't fair." He paused, his expression shifting to something that might have been contrition if you didn't look too closely. "I'd like to make it up to you." Rowan's hand moved to Elara's arm, a subtle protective gesture. "There's nothing to make up," she said. "We're done. We were done the moment you got back in that carriage. Are we?" Calvin's gaze moved between them, calculating. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've landed in a difficult situation. Living on charity, doing menial work. That can't be what you imagined when you came west." "It's better than what you offered," Calvin laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "Is it? Look around, Elara. These people are talking about you, judging you. Do you really think you have a future here, living out on that ranch with a man you barely know? That's enough." Rowan's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. Calvin ignored him. "I'm offering you a second chance. A real life. Security, respectability, everything you came here for." "I came here for a lie," Elara said. "You showed me that. I'm not interested in anything else you have to offer." "You might change your mind when winter comes. When the work dries up and you realize how hard life is out here for a woman alone." "She's not alone," Rowan said quietly. Calvin finally looked at him, really looked at him. "You planning to marry her, Hale? Make this arrangement respectable?" The room had gone quiet around them. People were watching now, not even pretending to look away. Rowan's expression didn't change. What I'm planning is none of your business. It is if you're ruining her reputation. Her reputation was fine until you opened your mouth just now. Rowan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Walk away, Calvin, before this gets ugly. For a moment it looked like Calvin might push back. Then Sheriff Coleman appeared beside them, his presence a clear warning. Gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Calvin straightened his jacket, his smile returning but strained now. Of course, just a friendly conversation. He looked at Alara one more time. When you change your mind, and you will, you know where to find me. He walked away, his companions following like shadows. The room slowly returned to normal, conversations resuming, but Alara could feel the weight of attention still on her. The damage was done. Calvin had made sure of that. Let's go, Rowan said.
No. Alara's voice was steady, despite the anger burning in her chest. If we leave now, he wins. They'll all think he was right. Alara, dance with me. Rowan stared at her. What? You heard me. Dance with me, right now, in front of everyone. I told you I don't care if you're terrible at it. I don't care if we look ridiculous. She grabbed his hand. Dance with me, Rowan. He looked like he wanted to argue. Then something shifted in his expression, and he led her onto the floor. The music was slower now, a waltz that Alara barely knew how to follow. Rowan's hand settled on her waist, awkward and uncertain. His other hand held hers too tightly. I have no idea what I'm doing, he muttered. Me neither. They moved through the steps clumsily, out of rhythm with the music and each other. Rowan stepped on her foot twice. Alara lost the beat completely and had to start over. But they kept going. Around them, people watched. Some with curiosity, some with judgment, some with something that might have been approval. Alara didn't care about any of them. She kept her eyes on Rowan's face, watching his concentration as he tried to navigate steps he clearly didn't know. This is stupid, he said. Probably. Everyone's staring. Let them. A small smile touched his mouth. You're stubborn. So are you. The song ended, and they stopped moving. For a moment they just stood there, still holding each other, while applause rippled through the room. Rose appeared beside them, beaming. That was the bravest thing I've seen all year. It was a dance, Rowan said. It was more than that, and you know it. She squeezed Alara's hand. Calvin's already left, by the way. Stormed out about 2 minutes ago. Good, Alara thought. Let him stew. They stayed another hour, long enough to make a point. Long enough for people to see that they weren't ashamed, weren't hiding. Then they collected their coats and headed for the wagon. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. The night air was cool, sharp with the promise of autumn. Above them, stars crowded the sky in a way Alara still wasn't used to, so many of them, brighter than anything she'd seen in Philadelphia. Thank you, she said finally, for dancing with me. I stepped on your feet. I didn't mind. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, He's going to keep pushing. Calvin, he doesn't like losing. I'm not his to lose. He doesn't see it that way. Alara pulled her coat tighter. What do you think he wants? Control. Appearances. Rowan shrugged. Maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe he actually regrets what he did. But I don't trust it. Me neither. They reached the ranch and Rowan helped her down from the wagon. His hands lingered on her waist just a moment longer than necessary. You meant what you said in there? He asked. That you're not interested in what he's offering? Yes, even though it would be easier? More respectable? Alara looked up at him, at this man who'd given her shelter when she had nothing, who'd taught her to ride horses and fix fences and survive in a world she didn't understand. I don't want easy, she said. I want real. Something changed in Rowan's expression, a softness she'd never seen before. He leaned down, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her. Then he pulled back, clearing his throat. It's late. You should get some sleep. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the barn to tend to the horses. Alara stood alone on the porch, her heart pounding with something she couldn't name. The next week passed in tense quiet. Calvin didn't come to the ranch, but his presence lingered like smoke. Margaret mentioned he'd been asking about Alara in town, casual questions wrapped in concern.
Danny reported seeing him watching the ranch from the road one afternoon, though he'd ridden off when spotted. "He's planning something," Danny said. "I can feel it." "Let him plan," Rowan replied. "He can't force her to do anything." But Alara felt it too, the weight of something coming, some confrontation that hadn't finished playing out. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon in the form of a letter. Danny brought it from town, handed it to Alara with a worried expression. "Calvin asked me to deliver this. I told him no at first, but he said it was important, legal." The envelope was expensive, cream-colored, with her name written in careful script. Inside was a single page. She read it twice, her hands trembling. Rowan found her sitting at the kitchen table, the letter spread in front of her. "What is it?" "Calvin's offering me a job, managing the household for his elderly aunt who lives in town. Room and board included, plus a salary." She looked up. "It's a legitimate offer, a way to stay in Montana without living here." Rowan's face went carefully blank. "That what you want?" "No, but—" She gestured at the letter. "It's respectable. It would stop the gossip. Is that what matters to you? What people think?" "It shouldn't matter, but it does." She stood pacing. "I can't hide out here forever, Rowan. I can't keep pretending this is normal." "What's not normal about it?" "Everything." The word burst out of her. "I'm living with a man I barely know, with no legal arrangement, no protection. If something happened to you, if you decided you didn't want me here anymore, I'd have nothing." "You think I'd do that? Just throw you out?" "I don't know what you'd do. That's the point." She pressed her hands against the table. "We don't talk about this. About what this is. What it means. We just exist together and hope it works out." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You want to know what this is?" "Yes." He crossed the room, stopping close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the conflict in his eyes. "It's me trying not to care about you and failing. It's me waking up every morning grateful you're still here and terrified you'll leave. It's me lying awake at night wondering what the hell I'm doing, bringing you into this broken-down life." He paused. "That's what this is, Alara. And I don't know how to make it more than that without ruining it." Her breath caught. "Rowan, take the job if you want. I won't stop you. But don't take it because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Don't take it because Calvin's offering you respectability and I'm offering you nothing. You're not offering me nothing. What am I offering then?" The question hung between them, demanding an answer she wasn't sure how to give. Before she could try, hoofbeats sounded outside. They both turned as someone pounded on the door. Rowan opened it to find Danny, breathless and agitated. "It's Calvin. He's coming here. Now. I saw him leaving town with papers, talking about making things official. I rode ahead to warn you." "Official?" Alara moved to the door. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but he had Sheriff Coleman with him." Rowan's expression hardened. "Get inside, both of you." Within minutes, 2 horses appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Calvin rode in front, Sheriff Coleman trailing behind with clear reluctance. They stopped at the porch. Calvin dismounted smoothly, holding a leather portfolio. "Rowan, Alara." He nodded to each of them. "Sorry to intrude, but this couldn't wait." "What do you want?" Rowan's voice was ice. Calvin opened the portfolio and pulled out several pages. "I've done some investigating. Turns out Miss Wynn here never officially registered her arrival in Montana territory. No legal residence, no declared occupation. Technically, she's in violation of territorial law." Sheriff Coleman shifted uncomfortably. "Calvin, this is the law, Sheriff. She needs a legal guardian or employer to remain here without family. That's the statute." Alara's stomach dropped. "That's not—" "It's an old law, rarely enforced, but it is on the books." Calvin's smile was thin. "I'm offering to be your legal sponsor, Alara. It would give you the protection you need, make everything legitimate." "She doesn't need your protection," Rowan said. "Actually, she does. Unless you're planning to marry her?" Calvin raised an eyebrow. "Because that would solve the problem too." The silence that followed was crushing. Rowan didn't answer, couldn't answer, and in that hesitation Alara saw everything. He cared about her, maybe even loved her in his broken, cautious way. But he wasn't ready to promise her anything, wasn't ready to risk that kind of vulnerability again. "I see," Calvin said softly. "Well then, The offer stands, Ilara. Legal sponsorship, respectable employment, a place in society. All you have to do is accept. Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think this whole thing is unnecessary. Miss Wynn's been nothing but a model citizen. But the law is the law, Calvin finished. Unless Rowan has another solution? Everyone looked at Rowan, waiting. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. Say something, she thought. Tell him to leave. Tell him I'm staying. Tell him you want me to stay. But Rowan just stood there, his face a mask, his silence saying everything and nothing. I need to think about this, Ilara heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Calvin's smile widened. Of course. Take your time. I'll be in town when you've made your decision. He mounted his horse with practiced ease, tucking the portfolio under his arm. Sheriff Coleman lingered a moment longer, his expression apologetic. Miss Wynn, if you need anything, legal advice, anything at all, my door's open. Thank you, Sheriff. Coleman tipped his hat and followed Calvin down the road. Danny waited until they were out of sight before exploding. That's complete horseshit. Pardon my language, but it is. That law he's talking about, nobody enforces that. Half the women in this territory would be illegal if they did. But it exists, Ilara said quietly. That's all that matters. No, what matters is Calvin's trying to manipulate you. Again, Danny turned to Rowan. Say something. Tell her she doesn't have to do this. Rowan stood motionless on the porch, his face unreadable. It's her choice. That's it? That's all you've got? Danny's voice rose with frustration. She's asking you to give her a reason to stay, and you're just... Danny, Ilara cut him off gently. It's all right. It's not all right. None of this is all right. But she could see it in Rowan's eyes, in the rigid set of his shoulders. He'd built walls so high after losing his family that even now, even with her standing right in front of him, he couldn't tear them down. Wouldn't tear them down. I should go, Danny said finally, defeated. Ma's expecting me. But Ilara, if you need anything, you know where to find us. After he left, the silence between Ilara and Rowan felt like a living thing, heavy and suffocating. You should pack, Rowan said. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. I'll take you to town in the morning. The words landed like stones. That's it? Ilara's hands clenched at her sides. You're just going to let me go? What do you want me to say? I want you to fight for me. I want you to tell Calvin to go to hell. Her voice broke. I want you to ask me to stay. Rowan finally looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw the pain there, raw and bleeding beneath the careful mask he wore. I can't. Why not? Because I already lost everything once. The words came out harsh, jagged. I buried a wife and a daughter. I stood over their graves and promised myself I'd never feel that kind of pain again. And then you showed up, soaking wet and broken, and I was stupid enough to let you in. Rowan, every morning I wake up terrified. Terrified that something will happen to you, that you'll get sick or hurt, or just realize this life isn't worth living and leave. And I can't... He stopped, his jaw working. I can't ask you to stay when I know I can't protect you from any of that. When I know I'll probably fail you the same way I failed them. Ilara felt tears burning behind her eyes. You didn't fail them. A fever isn't something you could control. I should have done more. Should have gotten a doctor sooner. Should have... He shook his head. It doesn't matter. What matters is I can't be what you need. Calvin can give you security, respectability, a future. I can give you hard work and gossip and a house full of ghosts. I don't care about any of that. You should. He stepped back, putting distance between them. You should care. You should want more than this. What if this is enough? What if you're enough? The question hung in the air, desperate and pleading. Rowan closed his eyes. Pack your things, Ilara. Please. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to shake him until he understood that she wasn't asking for guarantees or promises. She was just asking him to try. But she could see it was useless. He'd already decided, already closed the door. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll be ready in the morning. She walked past him into the house, climbed the stairs to her room, and closed the door. Only then did she let the tears fall. That night, sleep was impossible. Alara lay in bed listening to the house creak around her, remembering all the small moments that had built up over the past weeks. Rowan teaching her to ride, his hand steady on her back. The quiet dinners where they'd learned to exist comfortably in silence. The way he'd looked at her during the dance, like she was something precious he was afraid to hold too tightly. All of it ending because he was too scared to take a risk. She heard him moving around downstairs long after midnight. Heard the scrape of a chair, the clink of glass. He was drinking, probably, trying to drown out whatever he was feeling. Good, she thought bitterly. Let him suffer. But the anger felt hollow. All she really felt was tired. Morning came gray and cold. Alara dressed mechanically, packed her few belongings into the same suitcase she'd arrived with. The mending money went into her purse. $32 now, earned through her own effort. It felt like both too much and nowhere near enough. Rowan was waiting by the wagon when she came downstairs. He took her suitcase without meeting her eyes and loaded it into the back. The ride to town was excruciating. Neither of them spoke. The landscape that had started to feel familiar now looked foreign again, like she was seeing it through the wrong end of a telescope. They reached Millridge just as the town was waking up. Shopkeepers opening their doors, a few early risers moving along the boardwalk. Rowan drove straight to Calvin's house, a large, well-maintained home on the north side of town. Calvin must have been watching for them because he appeared on the porch before the wagon even stopped. Alara, I'm glad you came to your senses. His eyes flicked to Rowan with poorly concealed satisfaction. Rowan, thank you for seeing her safely here. Rowan didn't acknowledge him. He climbed down and retrieved Alara's suitcase, setting it on the ground with careful precision. Rowan. Alara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Look at me. He did, finally. The pain in his eyes nearly broke her. This is what you want? She asked. Really? His throat worked. It's what's best. For who? He didn't answer. Calvin descended the porch steps, all polite efficiency. Come inside, Alara. I'll show you to your quarters and introduce you to my aunt. I think you'll find the arrangement quite comfortable. Alara picked up her suitcase, her hands shaking. She wanted Rowan to stop her, wanted him to say he'd made a mistake, that he'd changed his mind. But he just stood there, silent and immovable. She followed Calvin into the house. The interior was everything Rowan's ranch wasn't. Ornate furniture, thick carpets, paintings on the walls. Calvin led her through a parlor to a small but nicely appointed bedroom. This will be yours. My aunt's room is just down the hall. She's elderly, mostly bedridden. You'll help her with meals, medications, correspondence, light housekeeping, nothing too strenuous. When do I start? Immediately, if you're amenable. I'll have the paperwork drawn up this afternoon. Once you sign, you'll be legally sponsored. All very official and proper. Alara set her suitcase on the bed. Through the window, she could see the wagon still parked outside, could see Rowan's back as he prepared to leave. Can I have a moment? She asked. Calvin's smile tightened. Of course. Take all the time you need. He left, closing the door behind him. Alara sank onto the bed, her legs suddenly unsteady. This was it. This was her new life. Safe, respectable, empty. She thought about the ranch, about the rhythm she'd found there, the sense of purpose, about Rowan's rare smiles and the way he'd looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, about how none of it had been enough to make him take a chance. A knock at the door startled her. Come in. It wasn't Calvin. It was an elderly woman in a wheelchair, her face kind but tired. She wheeled herself into the room with surprising strength. You must be Alara. I'm Constance Rourke, Calvin's aunt. Mrs. Rourke? Alara stood quickly. I didn't expect... Call me Constance and sit down, child. You look like you're about to collapse. Alara sat. Constance studied her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. My nephew tells me you need employment, legal sponsorship. Yes, ma'am. He also tells me you've been living at the Hale Ranch with Rowan. Alara's spine straightened defensively. I was working there, earning my keep. I'm sure you were. Constance's expression softened. I knew Rowan's wife, you know. Sarah, sweet girl. Her death nearly destroyed him. And the child, she shook her head. Some losses are too great to recover from. He told me about them. Did he? That's more than he's told most people. Constance wheeled closer. Let me ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Do you want to be here? The question caught Alara off guard. I need to be here. Legally. That's not what I asked. Alara looked down at her hands. No, I don't want to be here. Then why are you? Because Rowan won't fight for me. Because he's too scared of losing someone again to take a risk. Because I don't have any other choice. There's always a choice. Constance's voice was gentle but firm. You can take the safe path Calvin's offering. Play by the rules, live a respectable life, and wonder for the rest of your days what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to choose differently. Or you can go back to that ranch and make Rowan face what he's feeling. Make him see that hiding from loss doesn't protect you from it. It just guarantees you'll never have anything worth losing in the first place. Alara's throat tightened. He doesn't want me there. He's terrified of wanting you there. That's different. Constance reached out and took her hand. I've watched my nephew manipulate people for years. He's good at finding their weaknesses and exploiting them. But you know what? He picked the wrong woman this time. Because you're stronger than he thinks. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling confident. It's about being scared and doing the thing anyway. She squeezed Alara's hand. That man drove you all the way to town because he thought it was the right thing to do. Because he's convinced himself that letting you go is noble. Someone needs to show him how stupid he's being. Alara almost laughed. You want me to go back? I want you to decide what you actually want. Not what's safe, not what's proper. What you want. Through the window, Alara saw Rowan climb onto the wagon, saw him pick up the reins. What did she want? She wanted the ranch, the quiet mornings and hard work, the satisfaction of earning her own way. She wanted Rowan, broken, scared, stubborn Rowan, and the possibility of building something real with him even if it was messy and uncertain. She wanted to choose her own life instead of letting fear choose it for her. What about Calvin? She asked. The law he mentioned? Constance waved a dismissive hand. That law is rarely enforced. Calvin's using it as leverage. And even if someone tried to make an issue of it, there are ways around it. You could register as an independent businesswoman. Margaret would vouch for you as an employer. Or, she paused meaningfully, Rowan could marry you. He won't. He might if you give him a reason to. If you show him that running away doesn't solve anything. Alara stood abruptly. I need to go. Good girl, Constance smiled. Give my nephew hell for me. Alara grabbed her suitcase and ran. She burst out the front door just as Rowan was turning the wagon around. He saw her coming and pulled the horses to a stop, confusion crossing his face. Alara, what? She threw her suitcase into the back of the wagon and climbed up beside him. Drive. What are you doing? Taking you home. Drive, Rowan. You can't just... Yes, I can. Drive. Calvin appeared on the porch, his expression darkening. Alara, we had an agreement. We had a conversation, she called back. I never agreed to anything. And you know that law you mentioned? Your aunt says it's barely enforceable. You were bluffing. Calvin's face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. Rowan still hadn't moved. He was staring at her like she'd lost her mind. Are you going to drive this wagon? Alara said quietly. Or do I need to do it myself? Something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but something close to it. He snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, leaving Calvin standing on his porch looking furious and impotent. Alara didn't look back, didn't give him the satisfaction. They rode in silence for a few minutes, the town falling away behind them. Then Rowan spoke. What changed? Nothing changed. Everything changed. I don't know. Alara stared straight ahead. Constance asked me what I wanted, and I realized I wanted to stop letting other people decide my life for me, including you. Including me? You decided I should leave, decided it was better for me to go with Calvin than stay with you. You didn't ask what I wanted, you just made the choice and expected me to accept it. Rowan's jaw tightened. I was trying to do the right thing. The right thing for who? Because it sure as hell wasn't right for me. You deserve better than what I can give you. Stop saying that. Her voice rose with frustration. Stop deciding what I deserve. I'm a grown woman, Rowan. I get to choose what kind of life I want. And I choose this. I choose the ranch and the hard work and the uncertainty. I choose you,
even though you're too stubborn and scared to choose me back.
The wagon slowed. Rowan pulled the horses to a stop on the empty road, his hands shaking slightly on the reins. "I'm terrified," he said quietly. "Every day I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of losing you, of caring about you, and then watching you get sick or hurt or just tired of this life and leaving, of opening myself up to that kind of pain again." Alara turned to face him fully. "You think I'm not scared? I came to Montana for a man who rejected me in front of strangers. I'm living in a town where people think I'm a fallen woman. I have $32 to my name and no idea what tomorrow looks like. I'm terrified all the time." "Then why stay?" "Because being scared of losing something is better than having nothing to lose at all." She reached out and took his hand. "You can't protect yourself from pain by refusing to care about anyone. All you do is guarantee you'll be alone when it comes anyway." Rowan looked down at their joined hands. "I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in again." "Neither do I. But we could figure it out together." "What if I fail you? What if you don't?" She squeezed his hand. "What if we actually build something good? What if we're happy? Aren't those possibilities worth the risk?" He was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved through the grass around them, carrying the smell of sage and rain. "I want you to stay," he said finally. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "I've wanted you to stay since the first week. I was just too much of a coward to say it." "You're saying it now. I'm saying it now." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Stay, Alara, please. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Not because it's convenient. Stay because you want to, because you want this life. Want me." "I do want you." The words came easily now. "I want your quiet mornings and your terrible coffee and your stubborn refusal to ask for help. I want all of it." Rowan's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "I'm not good at this. At feelings and talking and all the things you probably need. Then we'll learn together." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His lips met hers gently, tentatively, like he was afraid she might break. The kiss was brief, almost chaste, but it felt like a promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." A small smile touched his mouth, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He kissed her again, longer this time, his hand tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "We should go home," he said. "Home." The words settled into her chest, warm and solid. "We should." They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, their hands linked between them. The valley opened up before them, the house standing small and sturdy against the endless sky. When they reached the barn, Rowan helped her down from the wagon. His hands lingered on her waist. "What now?" he asked. Alara thought about it, about Calvin and his threats, about the gossip in town, about all the practical problems they still had to solve. "Now we live," she said simply. "We work, we figure things out as we go, and we stop running from what we feel." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She leaned into him, breathing in the familiar smell of hay and leather and home. "I love you," he said quietly, the words muffled against her hair. "I should have said it before, should have said it instead of trying to push you away." Alara's eyes burned. "I love you too." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the fading afternoon light. Tomorrow there would be work to do, problems to solve, a town full of gossips to face down. But right now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough. Inside the house, Alara unpacked her suitcase for what she hoped was the last time. Rowan made coffee, terrible as always, and they sat at the kitchen table planning their next steps. "We should make it official," Rowan said. Get married. Not because of Calvin or the law or what people think, because I want to. Because I want everyone to know you chose this, chose me." "When?" "Soon. Next week, maybe. Unless you want something bigger?" Alara shook her head. "Small is good, just us and whoever we need for witnesses." "Danny and Rose?" "Perfect." They talked through the details, where to get a license, who to ask to perform the ceremony. Simple, practical plans for a simple, practical life. But underneath it all, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope that this might actually work. That night, Rowan walked her to her bedroom door like he had every night since she'd arrived. But this time, when she turned to say goodnight, he kissed her. Slow and deep, with all the feeling he'd been holding back. "Sleep well," he said when they finally broke apart. "You too." She watched him walk to his own room, then closed her door and leaned against it, her heart racing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Calvin wouldn't give up easily. The town would still talk. There would be hard days ahead, days when they'd question this choice, but they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. The morning after Alara returned to the ranch, she woke to the smell of burnt toast and what might have been coffee, but could just as easily have been used motor oil. She pulled on her robe and padded downstairs to find Rowan standing at the stove, staring at a pan of charred eggs with the expression of a man who'd just discovered fire and wasn't entirely pleased with the results. "I was trying to make breakfast," he said without turning around. "I can see that. It's not going well." Alara moved beside him and took the pan from his hand. "Go sit down. I've got this." "I wanted to do something nice after yesterday." She looked at him, really looked at him. His hair was sticking up on one side, there were circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept much, and he had that slightly lost expression of someone who'd spent the night confronting every fear he'd been running from for years. "The fact that you tried is nice enough," she said. "Now sit, before you burn down the house." He sat, watching her scrape the ruined eggs into the slop bucket and start fresh. The domestic simplicity of it felt profound somehow. This was what they were choosing: ordinary mornings, burnt breakfasts, the quiet work of building a life together. "Calvin's going to make trouble," Rowan said after a while. "I know. He's got pride and money, bad combination." "Then we'll deal with it." Alara cracked eggs into the pan. "Together." The word hung in the air between them, solid and real. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, making plans around mouthfuls of eggs and coffee. The marriage license required a trip to the county seat, about 20 miles east. They'd go tomorrow, get the paperwork started. Rose and Danny had already agreed to stand as witnesses. The ceremony itself would be simple, just the necessary words to make it legal. "You sure about this?" Rowan asked, his voice careful. "Marriage is permanent, no going back." "I'm sure." Alara met his eyes. "Are you?" "Yeah." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Yeah, I'm sure." They spent the day working side by side, falling back into the rhythm they'd established over the past weeks. Rowan fixed a section of fence while Alara tackled the mending Margaret had sent home with her. Around noon, Danny showed up with news. "Calvin's telling everyone you kidnapped her," he announced, bursting into the kitchen where Alara was working. "Says he offered you honest employment and Rowan forced you back to the ranch against your will." Alara set down the shirt she was mending. "He's saying what?" "It's complete garbage, obviously, but people are listening, some of them, anyway." Danny looked uncomfortable. "He's also saying the wedding is a sham, that you're only doing it to avoid legal consequences." "Let him talk," Rowan said from the doorway. "Won't change anything." "Maybe not, but it's making things difficult for Alara. Margaret's already had 2 women come by asking if it's true, if you're being held here against your will." Alara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Of course they did, because a woman couldn't possibly choose this life of her own free will." "That's not fair to them," Rose said, appearing behind Danny. "Some folks are genuinely concerned. Calvin can be very convincing when he wants to be." "So what do we do?" Alara asked. Rose sat down at the table, her expression thoughtful. "We throw a party." Everyone stared at her. "A what?" Rowan said. "A party. A celebration. Invite everyone from town out here to the ranch. Let them see for themselves that you're happy, that this is real. Take away Calvin's ammunition." "I'm not throwing a party," Rowan said flatly. "Why not?" "Because I don't like parties. I don't like crowds. And I sure as hell don't like performing for a bunch of gossips." "It's not performing," Rose countered. "It's showing people the truth. Right now all they have is Calvin's version of events. You need to give them a different story." Alara looked at Rowan, saw the resistance in every line of his body, but she also saw something else, a flicker of understanding. Rose was right. Running from the gossip wouldn't make it go away. They needed to face it head on.
What if we combined it with the wedding? Alara said slowly. Make it a celebration instead of just a ceremony. Invite people to see us get married, see the ranch, see that this is real. You want our wedding to be a spectacle? Rowan's voice was incredulous. I want our wedding to be honest. And if that means having witnesses beyond just Rose and Danny, then fine. Let people watch. Let them see we're not hiding. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're sure about this? No, but I think it's necessary. All right then. He looked at Rose. You want to plan a party? Plan a party. But keep it simple. I'm not turning this into some elaborate production. Rose's face lit up. Leave it to me. We'll make it beautiful. Over the next week, preparations consumed the ranch. Rose enlisted Margaret and half the women from town, and suddenly the simple ceremony Alara had imagined became something else entirely. Nothing fancy, Rose kept her word about that, but warm and welcoming. Benches were borrowed and arranged in the yard. Lanterns were strung from the porch. Margaret organized food, insisting she wouldn't hear of the bride cooking for her own wedding. Alara threw herself into the work, partly because there was so much to do, and partly because staying busy kept her from thinking too hard about what was coming. She was getting married to a man she'd known for barely 2 months, a man who'd spent most of that time pushing her away before finally letting her in. It should have terrified her. Maybe it did, a little, but mostly it felt right. Calvin made one more attempt to stop it. He showed up 3 days before the wedding with Sheriff Coleman in tow, carrying papers that supposedly proved Alara's legal status was in question. Rowan met them at the property line, his rifle resting casually across his arms. That's close enough, he said. Calvin stayed on his horse, his expression cold. I'm here on legal business, Hale. You going to shoot an officer of the law? Depends on whether he's trespassing. Rowan's eyes didn't leave Calvin's face. Coleman, you really want to be part of this? The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Calvin says Miss Wynne needs to answer some questions about her residency status. Miss Wynne is going to be Mrs. Hale in 3 days. Her status will be legal then. If the marriage is legitimate, Calvin interjected, which I have reason to believe it's not. What reason? Alara appeared on the porch, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. What possible reason could you have except that you can't stand the idea of me choosing someone else over you? Calvin's face flushed. This isn't about me. Everything's about you, Calvin. It always has been. You wanted me when you thought I'd make you look good. You rejected me when I didn't meet your standards. And now you want me back because losing to someone like Rowan hurts your pride. Someone like me, Rowan repeated, his voice dangerous and quiet. A rancher, Calvin said dismissively. A nobody living in the middle of nowhere with nothing to offer except hard work and isolation. Better than a banker who treats people like property, Alara shot back. At least Rowan's honest about who he is. Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat. Look, I don't want to be here any more than you want me here. Calvin's filed a complaint, so I have to follow up. But Miss Wynne, if you're telling me you're here of your own free will, and you're planning to marry Rowan legally, then as far as I'm concerned, there's no case. I'm here of my own free will, Alara said firmly, and I'm marrying him because I want to, not because I have to. Then we're done here. Coleman turned his horse. Calvin, you've wasted enough of everyone's time. Let it go. This isn't over, Calvin said, but there was something hollow in his voice now, something defeated. Yeah, it is, Rowan said. Get off my property. They watched Calvin and the sheriff right away. When they were out of sight, Alara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was satisfying, she said. He's going to keep trying, right up until the wedding, probably after. Let him try. He's already lost. Rowan came up onto the porch and pulled her into his arms. You're really not scared? Terrified, but not of marrying you, just of everything that comes after. That's fair. He kissed her forehead. I'm terrified too. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt almost staged. Alara woke early in the room that had become hers over the past weeks, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch coming to life. Today was the last morning she'd wake up as Alara Wynne. By evening, she'd be Alara Hale. The thought should have felt strange. Instead, it felt inevitable, like everything that had happened since she stepped off that train had been leading here. Rose arrived before breakfast with a dress,
Simple white cotton with lace at the collar. Nothing elaborate but beautiful in its simplicity. "Ma made it," Rose said, helping Alara into it. "She wanted you to have something special." Alara touched the fabric, feeling the care that had gone into every stitch. "Tell her thank you. It's perfect." "You're perfect." Rose stepped back, her eyes shining. "Rowan's a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one." "You're both lucky. That's the point." By noon, people started arriving. More than Alara expected. Seemed like half the town had decided to come see this wedding for themselves. Some out of genuine goodwill, she suspected. Others probably just curiosity, wanting to witness the spectacle of the woman Calvin Rourke rejected marrying a reclusive rancher. Alara didn't care about their reasons. They were here, and that was what mattered. Margaret pulled her aside just before the ceremony was set to start. "There's someone who wants to see you. In the house." Alara found Constance Rourke sitting in Rowan's parlor, her wheelchair positioned near the window. The old woman looked tired but determined. "Mrs. Rourke, Constance, I didn't know you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it. Had to see for myself if you went through with it." Constance smiled. "You look beautiful, child." "Thank you. I also wanted to give you this." She held out an envelope. "It's a letter, legal documentation that Calvin has no claim to you, no authority over your resident status. I had my lawyer draw it up." Alara took the envelope with shaking hands. "Why would you do this?" "Because Calvin's my nephew, but that doesn't mean I approve of everything he does. He's been a spoiled brat since he was a boy, and someone needed to knock him down a peg." She reached out and squeezed Alara's hand. "You did the right thing, coming back here. Choose love over security every time. Security is just another word for fear dressed up pretty." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just be happy. That's thanks enough." The ceremony itself was simple, just as Alara had wanted. A local judge performed it, the words brief and traditional. Rose stood beside Alara, Danny beside Rowan. The crowd gathered around, witnesses to promises being made and kept. When the judge asked if anyone objected, there was a moment of tense silence. Alara half expected Calvin to appear, to make one last dramatic attempt to stop this. But he didn't come. And when the judge pronounced them married, when Rowan pulled her close and kissed her in front of everyone, she felt something loosen in her chest. They'd done it. Against the odds, against the gossip, against every practical reason to walk away, they'd chosen each other. The celebration that followed was chaotic and warm. Margaret had organized enough food to feed twice the number of people present. Someone produced a fiddle, then a guitar, and soon there was music and dancing in the yard. People who'd never spoken to Rowan came up to offer congratulations, to shake his hand, to welcome him back into the fold he'd left years ago. Alara watched him navigate it all with visible discomfort but genuine effort. He wasn't built for crowds, would probably never love social gatherings, but he was trying. For her. Danny caught her watching. "You two are going to be all right, you know." "You think so?" "I know so. You're both too stubborn to let it fail." As evening fell and the guests began to leave, Alara found herself standing on the porch watching the last of them go. Rose and Danny were the final ones to depart, Rose pulling Alara into a tight hug. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it. We did it. No, you did it. You chose what you wanted instead of what was safe. That takes courage." After everyone left, Alara and Rowan stood in the yard surrounded by the remnants of the celebration. Empty plates, scattered chairs, lanterns still glowing in the gathering darkness. "That wasn't so bad," Rowan said finally. "Liar, you hated every minute." "Well, maybe not every minute." He pulled her close. "The part where I married you was all right." She laughed against his chest. "Just all right?" "Better than all right." His voice dropped, becoming serious. "Best decision I ever made." They stood there as the stars came out, the prairie stretching endlessly around them. Tomorrow there would be work to do, a life to build, challenges to face. But tonight, they were just two people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos and decided to take a chance. The next weeks fell into a new rhythm. Married life looked a lot like their life before. Same work, same routines, but different in subtle ways. Rowan's walls continued to come down, piece by piece. He talked more, smiled more, let Alara see the parts of himself he'd kept locked away. Calvin made one final appearance about a month after the wedding. Alara was in the garden, pulling the last of the summer vegetables, when she heard a horse approach. She stood, shading her eyes, and saw him sitting on that same expensive mount, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past weeks. "I'm leaving Montana," he said without preamble. "Bank's transferring me to San Francisco." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" "Not really, but it seems like the polite thing to say."
A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You know, I really thought you'd come back to me. Thought you'd realize what you were giving up. I knew exactly what I was giving up. That's why I stayed." Calvin was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy?" Alara looked past him toward the house, where she could see Rowan working in the barn. Thought about the life they were building together. Hard and uncertain, but real. "Yes," she said. "I am."
"Good." He gathered his reins. "For what it's worth, I hope it works out." "It will." He rode away without looking back, and Alara returned to her garden. That evening, when she told Rowan about the encounter, he just nodded. "Good riddance," he said. "You're not worried he'll cause more trouble from San Francisco?" "No, he's done. He knows he lost, and Calvin never wastes time on lost causes." Rowan pulled her into his lap as they sat on the porch. "We're free of him." Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with snow and wind. The ranch became isolated, cut off from town for weeks at a time. But instead of feeling trapped, Alara found peace in it. They spent long evenings by the fire, Rowan teaching her to read the ranching books he'd collected, Alara reading novels aloud while he whittled. She learned more about his past in those quiet months. About Sarah, his first wife, who'd been kind and gentle and nothing like Alara. About their daughter, who'd loved horses and had a laugh that could fill a room. About the fever that took them both in the space of a week, leaving him alone in a house that felt too big and too empty. "I thought I'd never get past it," he told her one night. "Thought I'd just work until I died and that would be enough." "What changed?" "You showed up, soaking wet and stubborn, and refused to leave even when I tried to push you away." Kissed her temple. "You reminded me that being alive is different from just surviving." Spring brought new challenges, a hard calving season, 2 horses that needed breaking, repairs to the barn that couldn't wait, but they faced it together, and gradually Alara stopped thinking of the ranch as Rowan's place and started thinking of it as theirs. Margaret's mending business grew to the point where she offered Alara a partnership. Between that income and the ranch, they weren't wealthy, but they were stable, secure, building something that would last. On a warm afternoon in May, almost a year after Alara first stepped off that train, she stood in the same garden where she'd confronted Calvin and felt the flutter of new life inside her. She hadn't told Rowan yet, wanted to be sure, wanted to choose the right moment. But as she watched him work in the distance, moving through tasks with the quiet competence she'd come to love, she felt something she hadn't felt since leaving Philadelphia. She felt home. That night over dinner, she told him. Rowan went very still, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He set the fork down carefully. "How long have you known?" "About a week. I wanted to be certain before I said anything." For a long moment, he didn't say anything at all. Just sat there, emotions warring across his face. Fear, joy, terror, hope, all tangled together. "Are you all right?" Alara asked quietly. "I don't know." His voice was rough. "I keep thinking about Sarah, about what happened last time. This isn't last time. Medicine's better now. We're closer to the doctor. And you're not alone this time." "No, I'm not alone." He stood and pulled her up with him, wrapping his arms around her. "I'm terrified." "Me too. But also," he pulled back to look at her face, "also happy. Is that allowed?" "It's required." He laughed, a sound that was half sob, and kissed her. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Alara was sick more often than not, and the work of the ranch became harder. But Rowan was there for all of it, taking on extra tasks without complaint, checking on her constantly, driving her into town for the doctor's appointments even when the roads were bad. Danny and Rose rallied around them too. Margaret organized the women from town to help with preparations. Even Constance sent gifts from her new home in Seattle, where she'd moved to be near her sister. And through it all, Alara watched Rowan transform. He was still scared, She could see it in his eyes every time he looked at her swelling belly, but he was learning to let hope coexist with fear, learning that love didn't require guarantees, just courage. The baby came on a cold January morning, entering the world with a cry that echoed through the house. A girl, healthy and strong, with Rowan's dark hair and Alara's stubborn determination already evident in the way she gripped the doctor's finger. Rowan held his daughter with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect." "She is," Alara agreed, exhausted and exhilarated. "What should we name her?" They'd talked about it endlessly over the past months, running through options and discarding them. But now, seeing her tiny face, Alara knew. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Rowan looked at her, understanding flooding his expression. "Yeah, that's exactly right." That night, while Hope slept in the cradle Rowan had built with his own hands, Alara lay in bed thinking about the journey that had brought her here, about the train platform and the rejection, about the choice to stay when leaving would have been easier, about building a life from broken pieces and finding that the cracks let the light in. She thought about the woman she'd been, convinced she needed Calvin's approval, his security, his version of success. And the woman she'd become, capable, independent, loved for who she actually was instead of who someone wanted her to be. "You thinking?" Rowan asked beside her. "Always." "About what?" "About how I came here for all the wrong reasons and ended up exactly where I needed to be." He pulled her closer. "You think it would have worked out if you'd made different choices? If you'd stayed in Philadelphia or gone back east?" "No, I think I had to go through all of it. The rejection, the fear, the uncertainty, to get here. To understand what I actually wanted instead of what I thought I was supposed to want." "And what did you want?" She thought about it, about all the moments that had led to this one. The choice to leave Philadelphia, the choice to get on that train, the choice to stay with Rowan when Calvin offered her an easier path, the choice to come back when fear almost drove her away. "I wanted to choose my own life," she said finally, "not have it chosen for me. I wanted to be brave enough to take a risk on something real instead of settling for something safe. I wanted you. I wanted this. All of it." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm glad you chose this. Chose me, even though I tried to push you away. Especially because you tried to push me away. Because when you finally let me in, I knew it meant something." They lay in the darkness, listening to Hope's soft breathing from the cradle, feeling the weight of the life they'd built pressing down on them like a blessing. The next morning, Alara woke to find Rowan already up, standing by the window with Hope in his arms. The early light painted them both in shades of gold and shadow. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He didn't turn. "About second chances. About how life doesn't always go the way you plan, but sometimes it goes better." "You think this is better?" "I think this is everything." He finally looked at her. "You're everything." Years later, when Hope was old enough to ask about how her parents met, they told her the truth. About the train platform and the rejection. About the choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. About building a life from broken pieces. "So Mama was supposed to marry someone else?" Hope asked, her eyes wide. "That was the plan," Alara said. "But it was the wrong plan," Rowan added. "Sometimes the best things in life come from plans falling apart." Hope considered this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult complexities. "So you're saying it's good when things go wrong?" "No," Alara corrected gently. "I'm saying that when things go wrong, you get to choose what comes next. You can give up, or you can build something new, something better." "And you built something better?" "We did." Rowan pulled both of them close. "We built this. We built you. We built a life worth living." It wasn't the fairy tale Alara had imagined when she boarded that train bound for Montana. There was no perfect romance, no happily ever after where everything magically worked out. There were hard days and harder choices. There were moments of doubt and fear and uncertainty. But there was also love. Messy, complicated, real love that grew from honesty instead of pretense. There was partnership built on mutual respect and shared work. There was courage to keep choosing each other, day after day, even when it was difficult. And standing in that ranch house, watching her husband teach their daughter to braid rope,
Elara understood something fundamental about happiness. It wasn't something you found. It wasn't something someone else could give you. It was something you built piece by piece through the choices you made and the courage to keep making them even when you were scared.
She'd come to Montana looking for security and found freedom instead. Looking for someone to complete her and found the strength to be complete on her own. Looking for a wedding and found a marriage worth fighting for. The wind moved through the prairie grass, carrying the smell of sage and rain. Somewhere in the distance, cattle called to each other. Inside the house, Hope's laughter rang out as Rowan pretended to fumble the rope braiding lesson. This was her life. Ordinary and extraordinary. Hard-won and precious. Built from rejection and rain and the choice to stay when every practical instinct said to run. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.